Running wrecks and boiling diesels, steaming 45 degrees. The time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent, to pay our share. How can we dance when our earth is turning? How do we sleep while our beds are burning? How can we dance when our earth is turning? How can we sleep while our beds are burning? The time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent now, to pay our share. The time has come, the facts are fact, it belongs to them, we're gonna give it back. Out where the river broke, the bloodwood and the desert oak, the western desert lives and breathes 45 degrees. The time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent, to pay our share. How can we dance when our earth is turning? How can we sleep while our beds are burning? How can we dance when our earth is turning? How can we sleep while our beds are burning? The time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent now, to pay our share. Time has come, the facts are fact, it belongs to them, we're gonna give it back. How can we dance when our earth is turning? How can we sleep while our beds are burning? How can we dance when our earth is turning? How can we sleep while our beds are burning? So yesterday my son comes home from biking and he's bleeding again. I mean, this was not unusual. Now, my son goes biking every day. That's not an exaggeration. And it seems like every other day he comes home with new cuts and scrapes and bruises. On this particular occasion, he was bleeding on his arm and on his leg. And I said, "Son, what happened? You're bleeding again." He said, "I am?" "Oh yeah." I said, "Help me understand. How are you always getting hurt whenever you go out biking?" And he said, "Dad," this is the essence of what he said, "Dad, I'll never get better unless I'm willing to take risks and get hurt. The only way I'll get better is if I try to do things that I can't do yet. When I try things beyond my current abilities, I will make mistakes. I will fall down. I will get hurt. But every time I try and fail, I learn. I get better. And over time, if I stick with it, I'm able to do jumps and trails and do things I couldn't do before. You should know this, Dad. You talk about growth all the time. You know growth requires risk. I can't grow, Dad, if I'm afraid to get hurt. Blood on my arms and blood on my legs means I'm taking risks and growing and getting better. This is what mountain bikers look like, Dad. You're going to have to get used to it." And I said, "Wow, that's a great sermon, son. Can I use that?" Friends, my son's right. You will never grow if you're not willing to take risks and make mistakes, if you're not willing to get hurt. Well, this reminded me of a story another pastor told me about his son a few years ago. He was driving his son to school. This was back in the olden days when that was a thing. His son was about 15 years old and was into skateboarding hardcore, like my son is into biking. And as they were driving to school, the father pointed to a teenager standing on the corner wearing shorts and a t-shirt holding a really nice Arbor skateboard. You see, the dad, like most good dads, had taken an interest in his son's passion for skateboarding, and he recognized the board brand. He pointed this teenager out to his son and he said, "Hey, is that one of your skateboarding buddies? He looks like a real skater." And the son said, "No, I have no idea who that is. But I'll tell you this, Dad, he's not a real skater. He's a poser." The father was baffled. I mean, how do you know he's a poser just by looking at him? Why would you say that? The son said, "Dad, look at his arms. Look at his legs. He's got no scrapes, no scars. If you've got no scars, you are not a real skater. You're a poser." Real skaters, real bikers have skin in the game, literally. Now this week, another 751 bodies were discovered in unmarked graves at a residential school in Saskatchewan. That's almost 1,000 bodies discovered in the past month from 2 schools. There are 138 more schools to go. There will be more, friends. And this week was such a sobering reminder that truth comes before reconciliation. And the truth is this: that was cultural genocide. We are finally starting to recognize this and own this as a nation. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm really struggling with this on many levels. But one of my struggles is this. Okay, now what? What can I do to help? What can I do to make this right? And what's interesting is that's what I was thinking a few weeks ago, when the whole nation was focused on the 215 bodies discovered in Kamloops. Then swiftly and suddenly, the whole nation's attention was shifted to London, Ontario, and the problem of Islamophobia, in light of the recent terrorist attack on an innocent Muslim family that killed 3 generations of a single family, leaving a 9-year-old boy as the sole survivor, recovering with serious injuries in a hospital. And like you, I was confronted with the reality of Islamophobia in Canada. And I found myself asking, okay, now what? What can I do to help? What can I do to make this right? It's what many, if not most of us, were thinking. Until this week, when the discovery of 751 bodies at a residential school in Saskatchewan reminded us of the problem we were all focused on a few weeks ago. Oh yeah, residential schools, cultural genocide. I have to do something about this. I have to make this right. And then someone this week reminded me of the millions of Syrians who are already suffering and are now about to lose more aid and support. Remember them? Remember when we were passionately caring about them? And then I remembered the persecution of LGBTQ in so many places in the world, like Iran and Nigeria, Cameroon, Uganda, Russia, the Philippines, Central America, and to a lesser degree in our own country. I remembered the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, where millions of Muslims are fleeing for their lives. I remembered the millions of children aged 5 to 11 who are victims of forced labor in so many parts of the world, used so that you and I can have clothes and groceries and smartphones and computers. I remembered the human slaves in the global fishing industry and the millions of sex slaves around the world. And then I remembered the climate change crisis we are facing today. And each time As these things came to my mind, I asked myself, okay, I'm aware of this very real issue. Now what? What can I do to help? What can I do to make this right? And to be honest, I feel overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed and a little bit exhausted. There are days when I feel compassion fatigue. Now, compassion fatigue is a condition characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion, leading to a diminished ability to empathize or feel compassion for others. Often described as the negative cost of caring. It's sometimes referred to as secondary traumatic stress. There is so much pain, so much injustice and suffering in the world, and I don't really know what I can do about most of it. Friends, it's really important to understand this is the first time in history where human beings are bombarded on a daily basis with tragedy and trauma and injustice from all over the world. From animal cruelty to videos of police mistreating and murdering Black people, to constant updates of the rising COVID-19 death toll, to constant warnings of environmental crises and climate change, we are constantly bombarded with doom, violence, injustice, and tragedy. And our fight, flight, or freeze stress response gets activated when we look at bad news, whether we're aware of it or not. Then our system releases stress hormones, such as adrenaline and cortisol, and that is not good to be in a perpetual state of agitation and excitement and stress. Mary Joy, a mental health counselor and trauma specialist, says repetition of bad news and images does damage to us through vicarious trauma. Much like a trauma survivor who has become hypervigilant and scans the world for danger, the doom scroller is also looking for negative events. Our brains begin processing the world as an unsafe place, which is one of many symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And this can cause us to be irritable and territorial and shut down and shut others out. All of these are trauma responses. And eventually, it leads us to less empathy for others. The reality is we don't have enough time to digest one story before another story breaks. And we can end up feeling emotionally numb, helpless, paralyzed. Friends, we simply cannot process this amount of tragedy and injustice, let alone respond in meaningful and helpful ways to everything we see and hear. Environmentalism, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous rights, equality for LGBTQ+ people, gender equality, affordable housing, sustainable living, animal rights, ageism, ableism. As a human being, it is simply too much to educate yourself and invest yourself in this many causes. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not diminishing any of these very real needs, causes, and issues. I'm simply saying that you cannot expect yourself to be actively involved in every legitimate need, cause, and issue in the world. But what has happened is many of us fear being perceived as heartless or being called out if we don't support and invest in the latest call to action for a certain cause, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one that is coming in a few days or a few weeks. And what this is resulting in is a bunch of posers. People are posing, virtue signaling, posting all the right things on their social media feeds because we want to be perceived as woke and compassionate and part of the solution. But it becomes about appearance, ego, making sure we are on the top of the latest injustice and sending out our support or outrage accordingly. Friends, it's like we're walking around with our top-of-the-line skateboard, but we're posers. We've got no scars. We've got no skin in the game. Much of the so-called activism I see is a mile wide and an inch deep. like a giant puddle that covers a lot of the surface but has no real impact on the environment around it. I mean, the first hot, dry spell and all that water simply evaporates like it was never there. My challenge to you and to myself is this: go deep in one or two areas rather than respond superficially in support of every issue, cause, and need that comes our way. That's how you will make a lasting, positive contribution in the world. You know, when I first came to Avon, I said this a lot. My ministry mantra is this: do few things and do them well. And I think that mantra, that philosophy of life is essential for most of us. Because most of us, we cannot be effective in helping create real, sustainable, positive change in the world in more than one or two areas. We must choose our one or two or three at the most causes and invest, go deep. You know, as a young fella, as a young minister, I felt pulled in 1,000 directions. I wanted to help. I wanted to care for my fellow human beings. I wanted to change the world, and I had a lot of energy. But as I've gotten older, I've become more in tune to my limitations. I've become more in tune with my finite amount of gifts, abilities, time, and energy. Now I understand I have to choose what I give my time and energy to. And I've chosen to go deep rather than wide. My calling, as I understand it now, is to help people grow and manifest their true essence by following the teachings of Jesus and attuning themselves to divine spirit. My purpose is to help you understand the teachings of Jesus and to help you practice the presence of God. That's what I'm going deep in. And at times it may seem like I don't care enough about this cause or that issue, and maybe I don't. One of the things that's important is that we remain open to divine spirit. I'm trying to remain open to a cause that divine spirit may be calling me to invest more deeply into today. But I also believe that the greatest hope for this world is to help individuals follow the way of Jesus and live in tune with divine spirit. I truly believe when more of us do this, justice will increase. Truth will prevail. Love will win. So, friends, here is my word of encouragement and my challenge to you. You know, some of you are overwhelmed and you are going to burn out or hit compassion fatigue if you haven't already, because you're trying to do too much. You are spread out a mile wide and an inch deep. You need to focus. Really invest yourself in one or two causes and go deep so that you really make a difference in those one or two areas. And some of you aren't doing a thing for anybody but yourselves, and that is not the way of Jesus. If all your time and energy and resources are invested for the benefit of you and your family or your tribe, you are not following the way of Jesus. Christ calls us to serve others, to serve the greater good of all in at least one or two ways. If you're serious about following Christ, then you need to ask Divine Spirit to reveal to you what cause or issue or need that God is calling you to invest in and make a difference in. Now, a point of clarification. I'm not calling us to bury our heads in the sand and ignore all the injustices and tragedies and suffering in the world. Not at all. Awareness is key. Awareness is good when it actually changes us, though, when it increases compassion and empathy and care. I know for myself, I am growing and being transformed as I listen to the stories of Indigenous peoples right now. I am being impacted when I hear their stories and when I hear the stories of people who are deeply invested. At the same time, I'm also learning to tune out the voices and the criticism and negativity of people whose activism runs a mile wide and an inch deep. There are a lot of activists and protesters who are just posers. They have no scars, they have no skin in the game. And I'm telling you, friends, developing discernment so you can see the difference between posers and the real deal, that is really important. So you know who to listen to, who to give your time and energy to, and who to ignore. Jesus was a master at learning who to listen to and who to ignore. If you don't believe me, go and read through the Gospels. But friends, there is power when someone speaks with integrity, when someone speaks from a place of deep investment, when someone who has skin in the game, who has sacrificed and suffered for their cause, when they speak, I listen. And I am being changed by listening to them. And I'm being challenged by them to sacrifice for the things that the Spirit has called me to invest deeply in. Friends, when Jesus says, pick up your cross, He's saying you have to be willing to sacrifice for your faith, for your beliefs, for your cause, for your convictions. If the Spirit is calling you to fight for gender equality or the LGBTQ plus community or Indigenous rights, or if the Spirit is calling you to boldly share the message of Christ with people in your community, whatever you sense the Spirit calling you to, go deep. Don't be a poser. Be willing to make sacrifices. That is the only way you are part of the solution. It's the only way you will bring positive, lasting change in the world. So what I'm encouraging you and challenging you to do is this. Do few things and do them well. Focus on one or two things and go deep. Don't let your faith be a mile wide and an inch deep. Don't let your activism be a mile wide and an inch deep. Don't pay attention to people whose views and convictions are a mile wide and an inch deep. Listen to the ones with skin in the game. Listen to the ones with scars to prove it, and let them change you and empower you and inspire you, and motivate you. I love playoff hockey. It's just the way it is. You can judge me if you want, but I love it. And I'll tell you this, teams that win Stanley Cups are made up of individuals that are willing to sacrifice and put it all on the line. A shout out to the Montreal Canadiens. I'm a Maple Leafs fan, but I recognize the real deal when I see it. And the Habs, they're the real deal. I mean, a lot of Habs fans are kind of annoying, but the team itself is solid and I'm cheering for them. Now, the same principle applies to any team or church or movement. Any movement that brings effective, lasting change consists of individuals who are willing to sacrifice and put it all on the line. Anything less, it's posing. The cross and resurrection of Jesus teach us so many things. But one thing they teach us is this: victory doesn't come without scars.
Cross I thought